You sort of, I sort of regard the character that you create for yourself, the way you express yourself in the poems, as very much a comic character or a tragicomic character. Very much an underdog who's sort of oppressed by all these sort of right-wing kind of
Yeah, well, I sort of see myself as a cynical hermit
yeah,
sort of thing like
but
that.
there is very there's very strong underlying current of humour in all your
Oh
poems.
yeah, well I think that's really the only way in this society that the workers can fight back. I mean, we
Yeah,
might hear a lot
yeah.
about strikes, but strikes are pretty rare, really.
Yeah.
Really, I mean, you might
Yeah.
have one every 5 years or something like that. And I mean, the way the worker fights back is with humour, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, he reduces the boss's obsessions to nonsense by not taking them seriously. I was sitting in the office trying to explain granular activated carbon and define empty bed contact time when the phone rang. It was the wrong phone. It was George's phone. George was on leave. I hate answering his phone. It rang and rang and rang and rang. I looked around. No one else seemed very interested. I put on my best official voice. Mr. Brown's phone, I said. On the other end, some consultant trying to separate the ratepayers from their money for professional services via the old boy net. He and George went to Melbourne Grammar, trained to be rulers. I tried to play dumb. I've got a stutter, but I can't turn it on and off at will. Mr. Brown's on leave for 2 weeks, I said. I can't authorise payment. I got no authority. I just do as I'm told. And on this matter, no one told me anything. After 10 minutes of feeble argument on these lines, I convinced him that he was wasting time, alias money, and he hung up. I'd done my bit to promote the board's reputation among right-thinking Melbourne grammar men for blundering inefficiency. I wish the bosses would wear their phones around their own necks instead of around my neck. I went back to empty bed contact time. George's phone rang again, but I wouldn't answer it. The morning of a bullshit artist. When I got to work, Brian and John were arguing about the word spondee and whether it was the same as the word spontoon. They wanted me to arbitrate. Barry wanted to know Lewis Carroll's real name. Ian wanted to know the difference between ethanol and methanol. Bill wanted me to explain Volchart's valve gear for reciprocating steam engines. Yelchi rang me up to ask me what sort of government they have in Turkey. Finally, the boss came dancing out of his office and asked me to explain the term ultra-virus. And none of this had anything to do with work whatsoever. For us fully paid up, card-carrying members of the Federated Union of office know-alls, polymaths, smart alecks, bush lawyers and bullshit artists, life wasn't meant to be easy. I'm in the shit business. I work for the sewerage department. I analyse experiments. I draw graphs and flowcharts and conclusions. Today, I was sitting at my desk trying to explain the dissolved air flotation process, where streams of little bubbles are released into a tank full of sewage to float the suspended solids up to the surface to be skimmed off. But what I was really thinking about was lunchtime. The canteen cook caters to the ethnic multitudes by putting on Italian eats most days. I was thinking of ravioli with meat sauce, but I was writing things like, the sludge produced by this process is grey-brown in colour and does not produce offensive odours, provided anaerobic conditions can be prevented. The sludge is really composed of my used ravioli, and the boss's used steak, and your used hamburger, and the vegetarians' used brown rice, all mixed up together. And when it gets into this state, no one wants to know about it, except me. I don't find shit offensive. Most people do. They can't wait to push the button or pull the chain or something. And then they think the shit has vanished into the centre of the earth. Hasn't really, just floats up somewhere else. However, it's all biodegradable. I reckon most people think that shit is the most deadly poison on the face of the earth. They'd rather face 10 tonnes of plutonium than half a bucket of shit, even their own. No curse in the English language is complete without shit included in it somewhere. Lunchtime arrived. I ate my ravioli. I had a shit. It was brown in colour. I felt a lot better. This is a workers' compensation poem. It's called Bruno's Injury. Bruno used to work here. Bruno hurt his back lifting filing cabinets around. He went home and went to bed. Next day, he felt worse. He called in the doctor. He got a certificate saying he'd been seriously injured and was incapacitated. He put in for workers' compo. Time passed. One Sunday morning, the insurance company sent private detectives to check out this case, and using all the resources of modern technology, they took a film of poor old Bruno mowing his lawn and washing his car. With this film in their possession, Bruno couldn't get anywhere with 50 doctor certificates. He lost his case. All this was quoted to us as a warning if we ever made similar claims. I don't know what happened to Bruno. This one's called My Brother at the Dole Office. My brother Mick didn't get his Dole check. There'd been a mix-up in the system at the Dole office. He was asked to identify himself. He had his bank book. That wasn't acceptable. He might have stolen it. One of the blokes behind the counter went to school with him. He said he'd identify him. That wasn't good enough. They might be in collusion. He was told they'd accept a baptismal certificate. He's an atheist and comes from an atheist family. He's never been baptised. He probably never will be. He's never had a job either. Only slave labour like fruit picking. I guess our rulers, like Guilfoyle, Minister for Insecurity, Viner, Minister for Sacking, Street, Minister for Starting Strikes, all come equipped with baptismal certificates, all have stolen bank books and are in collusion with people who matter. That's the sort of activities that they'd understand. Mick didn't get his Dole money. He lives with his mother. She's on a widow's pension. He passed his HSC. That didn't do him any good. Mr. Howard failed mathematics when he was at the university. That's why he's treasurer. He can't count the cost. Mick's got a beard and a golden earring. He's already going bald at 19. He doesn't look normal. He's not easy to get on with. He's only a statistic waiting to be exterminated. Though, if he'd inherited a sheep station or an asbestos mine or been a tangible success of some sort in a way that could be measured by cost-benefit analysis, they'd all love him because that would show enterprise. If you want to avoid being a Dole bludger, be sure you pick your parents carefully. Learn to cheat and steal. Never tell the truth if you can think of a good lie, and try hard to look like everyone else. This isn't a very hopeful story. Seems to be no solution to all that don't seem normal. All governments behave like this, whether they're Fraser or the Petrograd Soviet or Richard the Lionheart. Success is all they care about. I don't have any answers. This one is called Noisy Incident. Last Sunday, I got on the train at Box Hill. I've been visiting my mother. I sat down, I got out a book to read. It was called Black Years, Red Years. It was about anarchism in Spain. A Christian also got on, carrying a large Bible. He sat down opposite. He was very tall and thin, with white hair. He was incredibly clean looking. It was almost as if he'd passed through a car wash. He looked at me. I am fat, bald, bearded and dirty. He looked at the black and red cover of my book. He looked at the magic word anarchism on the cover. He spoke in a resounding pulpit voice. He said, "Excuse me, are you a success?" I looked at him. I thought for a moment. Fucking hell, I thought. I don't want 20 minutes of dialectical argument with this character on the anarchist attitude to virgin birth or some such. I must do something very spectacular. I opened my mouth. "Yes!" I shouted in my loudest voice. The force of the sound waves nearly knocked him over. He looked incredibly crestfallen. I went back to reading. He looked out the window. I read about how it was so terribly wrong for the anarchists to have burned so many churches in Spain. Intolerant atavism, the author called it. I wasn't so sure about that at all. I live in Richmond. In the street where I live, which is very narrow, is a big old wooden house surrounded by a high fence. No one seems to live in it. It backs out onto a fancy restaurant in the next street. The fancy restaurant used to be a clothing factory. Before that it was a cheap supermarket. The proprietors of the restaurant want to demolish the old house and turn the space into a car park for their expected patrons from the outer suburbs. That's the future of Richmond, I guess. All the stupid inhabitants like me who are in the way of private enterprise will be turned out of our houses, which will be demolished to make car parks to keep the rich happy. And if the rich are happy, who could ask for anything more?